I used to think dependence was just what love turned into when you stayed long enough. It didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt practical. It felt like teamwork. I met him when I was 24, fresh out of a bad roommate situation, juggling a retail job and a half-finished degree I kept promising myself I'd go back to. He was older, steady, already established in a way that felt grounding. He had a car that actually started every time, a job with benefits, a quiet confidence that made me feel like I could finally exhale around someone. At the beginning, I didn't need him, or at least that's what I told myself. I had my own apartment, my own bills, my own life. He just fit into it easily. He liked cooking dinner together. He remembered things I said in passing. He showed up when he said he would. When my car died on the side of the freeway one night after closing shift, he drove 40 minutes without complaining. I remember sitting in the passenger seat afterwards, exhausted, watching the city lights smear across the windshield, thinking, this is what safe feels like. The shift was slow, subtle. It happened in small decisions that made sense at the time. When my lease ended, his place was closer to my job. When my hours got cut, he told me not to stress, that he had it covered. When I talked about going back to school, he said we could figure it out later, once things settled down. I trusted him. I trusted the way he said things like they were already decided because he was thinking ahead for both of us. By the time we'd been together 3 years, I was living in his house, driving his spare car, working part-time, and telling myself I was lucky. I didn't notice how often I asked before making plans, or how my friends slowly stopped inviting me out because I always had to check with him first. I didn't notice how my name wasn't on anything important. The house wasn't mine, the car wasn't mine, even the phone plan was under his account. It felt easier that way, less to manage, less to worry about. He never yelled. That's something I used to defend him with. He wasn't controlling in the loud, obvious way. He just had opinions. He preferred things done a certain way. He worried. He'd say the world was unpredictable, people were unreliable, and we were better off sticking close. When I pushed back, he'd look hurt, like I was accusing him of something cruel. So I learned to soften, learned to compromise, learned to let things go. The cheating didn't come out all at once. It leaked. It crept into my life through moments that didn't add up. A phone turned face down when I walked into the room, a sudden password change, late work nights that didn't match his paycheck. I asked casually at first, joking even, because I didn't want to be the kind of girlfriend who accused without proof. He laughed it off, told me I was imagining things, told me I watched too many true crime videos. I wanted to believe him. That's the part that still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. I wanted him to be honest more than I wanted to be right. I ignored the way my stomach dropped when I smelled perfume on his jacket that wasn't mine. I ignored the fact that he stopped reaching for me in bed, started turning away earlier, started saying he was just tired. The night everything cracked open wasn't dramatic at first. It was a Tuesday, rainy. I was home alone, folding laundry that didn't even feel like it belonged to me anymore, when his old tablet chimed on the kitchen counter. He hadn't used it in months. I didn't even know it still worked. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything. I glanced at the screen because the sound startled me. It was a message preview, a name I didn't recognize, a heart emoji, and a line that said, "I miss you. Last night was amazing." My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down on the floor. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a mistake, a spam message, anything. I unlocked the tablet because the passcode hadn't been changed. That should have been my first clue. He didn't think I'd ever look. There were months of messages, photos I wish I could unsee, plans, jokes, intimacy that sounded effortless in a way ours hadn't been in a long time. She knew about me. That part was clear. He talked about me like I was a responsibility, a complication, something he was managing. He said I depended on him, that leaving me would ruin my life, that he was waiting for the right time. I don't remember standing up, but suddenly I was pacing the kitchen, my heart pounding so loud it felt like it might burst. I felt stupid, exposed, like the floor had vanished under my feet and I was free-falling through a version of my life I hadn't known I was living. I kept thinking about all the times I'd trusted him, all the moments I'd let myself shrink to keep the peace. When he came home that night, I was sitting at the table with the tablet in front of me. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just asked him who she was. The look on his face told me everything before he said a word. Surprise, fear, and then something colder, calculation. He didn't deny it. He sighed, like I'd caught him doing something mildly inconvenient. He told me it wasn't what it looked like, which is still the most insulting sentence anyone has ever said to me. He said he never meant for me to find out like this. He said he loved me. He said he was stressed. He said I was overreacting. I asked him how long. He told me almost a year. I don't know how I stayed upright through that conversation. I don't know how I listened while he explained his betrayal like it was a scheduling error. What I do remember is the moment I said I was leaving, the way his tone changed instantly, the way his voice sharpened. He asked where I thought I was going. That's when it hit me. I didn't have an answer.
I had no savings, no car in my name, no lease, no job that could cover rent anywhere in the city. My family lived across the country. My friends had drifted away. Everything I needed to function was tied to him, and he knew it. He'd known it before I did. He leaned back in his chair and told me to calm down, told me I was being dramatic, told me we could work through this if I stopped threatening to blow everything up. He said leaving would be a mistake. He said I depended on him, and he wasn't wrong. I went to bed that night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the relationship I thought I was in had quietly turned into a trap. The cheating was bad enough, the betrayal burned, but the worst part was understanding how carefully my world had been built around him and how little of it was actually mine. The morning after I found out, the house felt unfamiliar, like I was staying in someone else's place without permission. I woke up early on the narrow guest bed, my neck stiff, my eyes burning from not sleeping. For a second, there was this quiet, stupid hope that the night before had been some kind of stress dream. Then I heard him moving around in the kitchen, cabinets opening, the coffee grinder buzzing, like nothing had changed, like my life hadn't just cracked straight down the middle. I stayed in the room until I heard the front door close. Only then did I get up. I walked through the house slowly, barefoot on the cold tile, noticing things I'd never really looked at before. The framed photos on the wall were mostly his college graduation, his parents' anniversary.
A vacation we took together last year, where I remembered feeling off the whole time but couldn't explain why. I looked at my face in that picture and saw how much smaller my smile was compared to his. I made coffee, even though my stomach was in knots. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and started doing math I didn't want to do. How much money I had, how much I made, how much rent cost anywhere within 50 miles. Every number ended the same way. I couldn't leave. Not today. Not this week. Probably not this month. The realization settled in slowly, heavy and humiliating. When he came home that evening, he acted like we were just two people who'd had a disagreement. He asked if I'd eaten. He told me about his day. He didn't apologize. Not really. When I brought up what I found, he sighed again, that same exhausted sound, like my pain was an inconvenience he had to manage. He said we needed to talk like adults. He said I was spiraling. He said relationships were complicated and things weren't always black and white. He told me the affair didn't mean he didn't care about me. He said I was safe here, that I had stability, and throwing that away over something emotional would be reckless. That word stuck with me. Reckless. As if staying with someone who lied to my face for a year was the reasonable choice. I told him I needed space. He said fine, but reminded me the guest room wasn't meant for long-term living. He said it casually, like he was talking about replacing a light bulb. I realized then that even my physical space in that house was temporary, conditional, something he could take back whenever he wanted. The days blurred together after that. We existed in the same house, but barely spoke. When we did, it was tense, clipped, loaded with things neither of us wanted to say out loud. I started picking up extra shifts wherever I could, even ones that barely paid, just to be out of the house. I reached out to old friends I hadn't talked to in months, trying to sound normal, trying not to dump my entire situation on them in one message. Most were sympathetic but distant. Everyone had their own lives, their own families, their own couches already occupied. At night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the house. His footsteps, the TV in the living room, the occasional buzz of his phone that made my chest tighten. I wondered if it was her. I wondered if he missed her. I wondered if he was relieved I hadn't left, because it meant he didn't have to make any real decisions. One night, about a week after everything came out, I overheard him on the phone in the backyard. I wasn't trying to listen, I was just grabbing water. But his voice was low, urgent, familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. I froze behind the sliding door. He was telling her it was complicated, that I was still there, that he couldn't just kick me out. He said I depended on him. He said it again, like it was a fact he'd memorized. He told her to be patient. Something snapped in me then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet breaking point, where I realized he wasn't choosing between us. He was choosing himself. He was keeping me around because I was convenient, because he made my life easier, because he fit into the version of stability he wanted to present to the world. I confronted him when he came inside. I told him I heard everything. For the first time, he got angry. He accused me of spying, of invading his privacy, of making things worse than they already were. He said if I didn't like how things were, he knew where the door was.
I asked him if he was threatening to kick me out. He shrugged, said he was just being honest. That night, I packed a bag. Not because I had somewhere to go, but because I needed to feel like I still had the ability to choose something. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the open suitcase, trying to decide what parts of my life were actually mine. Clothes I bought with my own money. Books I loved. Small things that felt like proof I existed outside of him. I called my mom for the first time in weeks. I didn't tell her everything. I couldn't. I just said things weren't good, that I might need help soon. She asked if I was safe. I said yes, even though I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. The next morning, he noticed the suitcase. His tone shifted again, smoother this time. He told me I was being impulsive. He said leaving without a plan would be a disaster. He reminded me of everything he paid for, everything he provided. He said he was trying to protect me from making a mistake I'd regret. That's when I realized how deeply trapped I was. He wasn't holding me there with locks or threats. He was holding me there with fear, with the knowledge that the world outside that house was expensive and unforgiving, and that starting over from nothing was terrifying. I stayed, not because I forgave him, not because I believed his excuses. I stayed because I needed time. Time to save money. Time to figure out a way out that didn't end with me sleeping in my car or begging for a couch. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being smart. But every day I stayed, something inside me eroded. I stopped laughing. I stopped feeling like my body belonged to me. I started moving through the house quietly, carefully, like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. I hated him for what he did. I hated myself for needing him. And beneath all of that was a growing, suffocating fear that by the time I was finally able to leave, there wouldn't be enough of me left to recognize who I used to be. By the third month after I found out, I started measuring my life in small, quiet victories. $10 tucked into a savings envelope he didn't know about. A new shift added to my schedule. An email sent to a community college advisor asking about re-enrollment. I didn't tell him any of it. I moved through the house like a ghost, polite and distant, careful not to trigger his moods. He still slept in the master bedroom. I stayed in the guest room. Sometimes he tried to bridge the gap with casual touches, jokes, reminders of inside humor we used to share. It made my skin crawl. When I pulled away, he'd act wounded, like I was punishing him unfairly. Other times he'd flip and become cold, sharp, reminding me without words who owned the house, who paid the bills, who had the power to make my life very uncomfortable if he wanted to. I learned quickly how conditional his kindness was. The other woman never disappeared. He said he'd ended things, but I stopped believing his words a long time ago. The phone still buzzed late at night. He still took work calls in the garage. He still guarded his devices like state secrets. I stopped confronting him. I stopped asking questions. Knowing the truth didn't change anything except how much it hurt. What changed was me. I started noticing how small my world had become. I went to work. I came home. I stayed in my room. On my days off, I'd sit in my car in parking lots just to feel like I was somewhere else. I watched other people walk in and out of coffee shops, grocery stores, restaurants, living lives that felt impossibly far away from mine. I felt embarrassed by how stuck I was. Embarrassed that I'd let myself disappear into someone else's life so completely.
One afternoon, I ran into an old coworker at a gas station near my job. She asked how I was doing, really doing, and something in her tone made my throat tighten. I almost told her everything right there between the candy rack and the lottery tickets. Instead, I smiled and said I was fine. After she left, I sat in my car and cried so hard my chest hurt. I realized how lonely I'd become, how isolated, how much of that isolation wasn't accidental. That night, he came home irritated. He complained about traffic, about work, about how tense things were between us. He said it felt like I was punishing him by being distant. I finally snapped. I told him I wasn't distant. I was protecting myself. I told him he didn't get to cheat on me and then demand emotional access whenever it suited him. He stared at me like I'd spoken a different language. Then he laughed, not amused, dismissive. He told me I was living in the past. Then if I couldn't move on, maybe I should reconsider staying. The implication hung heavy in the air. That was the night he told me I needed to start contributing more. He said money was tight, that supporting two people was stressful. He suggested I pick up more hours or find a better paying job. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but the timing wasn't lost on me. It was pressure, a reminder, a way to shift blame onto me for the imbalance he'd created. I worked myself into exhaustion after that. I took shifts I shouldn't have. I said yes when my body begged for rest. I came home sore and drained, only to be met with his indifference or irritation. The more I tried to build independence, the more tense the house became. He noticed the changes, the secrecy, the way I guarded my phone now, the way I stopped asking him for anything. One night he asked me outright if I was planning to leave. I froze. My heart hammered in my chest. I told him I didn't know. It was the safest answer I could give. He nodded slowly, like he was filing that information away. He told me he just wanted honesty. He said he didn't want to be blindsided. The irony almost made me laugh. A week later, I came home to find the spare car gone, the one I drove. He told me he'd lent it to a friend. He didn't know when he'd get it back. He said it casually, like it wasn't a big deal, like he hadn't just taken away my ability to get to work without asking him for help. I felt panic rise in my throat. He watched me carefully, gauging my reaction. I realized then how calculated he could be, how he knew exactly which strings to pull to remind me how dependent I still was. I borrowed rides. I paid for ride shares I couldn't really afford. I adjusted. I didn't give him the reaction he wanted. That seemed to irritate him more than anything else. The breaking point came on a Friday night when he didn't come home. No text, no call. I sat in the living room until after midnight, pretending I wasn't waiting, pretending I didn't care. When he finally walked in, smelling like alcohol and that same unfamiliar perfume, something inside me went completely still. I asked him where he'd been. He told me it wasn't my business anymore. That sentence changed everything. I realized in that moment that there was no version of this where I healed while staying. No amount of saving, no careful planning, no waiting for the right time would make this situation survivable long term. He wasn't just someone who cheated. He was someone who was willing to keep me small, scared, and stuck, as long as it benefited him. That night after he passed out in the bedroom, I sat on the floor of the guest room and booked a one-way flight with the money I'd been hoarding. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't ideal. But it was real. I emailed my manager asking for a transfer. I texted my mom and told her I was coming. I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. But for the first time in months, the fear wasn't paralyzing. It was sharp, focused, alive. I knew when he woke up, everything would change. I knew he wouldn't let go easily. I knew leaving wouldn't be clean or calm or simple. But I also knew that if I didn't leave now, I might never leave at all. I left before sunrise. The house was quiet in that heavy, suspended way that only exists when someone thinks they still has control. I moved slowly, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might give me away. I packed only what I could carry without making noise. Clothes, documents, my laptop, the envelope of cash I'd hidden inside an old sweater. I didn't look around for nostalgia. I didn't take photos. I didn't pause at the doorway. I knew if I let myself feel even a fraction of what I was leaving behind, I'd freeze. I ordered a rideshare instead of waking him up for a ride to the airport. That felt important, like a small declaration of independence. When the car pulled up, I stood on the porch for a second, breathing in the cold morning air, telling myself this was real, that I was actually doing it. My phone buzzed as soon as I got in the back seat. "Where are you?" I didn't respond. The messages started stacking up as we pulled away. Confusion. Then irritation. Then anger. He called twice. I declined both. By the time we hit the freeway, my hands were shaking so badly I had to set the phone face down and stare out the window. The city slid past in streaks of gray and orange. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, instead of in circles. At the airport, I blocked his number. That decision felt heavier than I expected. Final.
Irreversible, but also clean. Like cutting a wire that had been humming under my skin for years. I cried in the bathroom after security. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Just silent tears that wouldn't stop. People moved around me, adjusting backpacks. Checking boarding passes.
That silence felt powerful in a way I wasn't used to, like reclaiming something he'd taken without me realizing it. I got a job within a month. Not glamorous, not high-paying, but mine. I opened my own bank account, bought my own phone plan, started school part-time again. Every small step felt monumental. I celebrated things no one else would have noticed. Paying a bill on time, buying groceries without checking in with anyone, making plans without asking permission. The hardest part wasn't rebuilding my life. It was rebuilding my sense of self. I had to relearn how to trust my instincts, how to sit with discomfort without immediately looking for someone else to fix it, how to be alone without feeling like I was failing. Sometimes, late at night, the memories still creep in. The good ones. The moments where he made me laugh, the way his hand used to find mine automatically. I don't deny those anymore. I don't pretend it was all bad, but I also don't let those memories rewrite the truth. The truth is, love shouldn't cost you your autonomy. Safety shouldn't feel like a cage. Dependence shouldn't be mistaken for devotion. I don't know what he's doing now. I don't know if he stayed with her or moved on to someone else who needed him just enough to feel powerful. I stopped wondering after a while. My life got fuller, louder, more mine. It took leaving to realize how trapped I'd been. Not just by him, but by my own fear of starting over, of failing, of being alone. What I found on the other side wasn't easy or perfect or painless, but it was honest. It was mine. And that, more than anything, saved me.